There's nothing quite like inheriting a large estate that may or may not be haunted due to the bloody and horrible past events committed by its residents. It reminds me of home. We're taking a quick peek at Black Mirror. Black Mirror is a bit of an odd title when it comes to what it is. It's a third-person adventure game that's sort of a remake and sort of a reboot of a previous series called The Black Mirror, and has nothing to do with the television show Black Mirror, because that's not confusing at all. The Black Mirror was released in 2003 by Unknown Identity before being turned into a trilogy by Cranberry Productions with a sequel in 2010 and a final title in 2011. After that, the series was picked up by the publisher THQ Nordic, who used to be known as Nordic Games before they bought up a bunch of THQ's properties when that company went out of business. THQ Nordic has been re-releasing as well as reintroducing many of their acquired titles over the past few years, such as giving the De Blob series a PC release and working with Gunfire Games to finally give Darksiders that long-awaited third game. Okay, you still with me here? Cause I ain't done just yet. Black Mirror, the one from 2017, not the TV show nor The Black Mirror and its sequels, was developed by King Art Games, which you may or may not know from their other adventure games like The Book of Unwritten Tales or Raven: Legacy of a Master Thief. Apparently, King Art Games came up with the concept for the second Black Mirror game, but development of that project ended up in the hands of Cranberry Productions. As of 2017, Cranberry hasn't released any titles since 2012, although the company seems to still exist in some capacity. In the meantime, the Black Mirror franchise has fallen back into the lap of King Art Games. The question is, now that they actually got to make a game in the series, what did they end up doing with it? I can only really guess if this new Black Mirror game is a reboot and not part of the storyline of the other games, since it follows the events of the Gordon family and their estate called Black Mirror, just like the previous games. Both the Gordon and Black Mirror names are reused in King Art's title, but this game takes place in the 1920s and in Scotland, opposed to the original games taking place in the 1980s and forward in England. The characters and events seem to somewhat contradict or differ from each other as well, but since the new game takes place 60 years before the old games, anything could have happened within that time gap to make it all line up into one continuous storyline. The only way to know if it's really connected is if this series continues past this 2017 release to another game that may connect them both together or go off on its own separate paths. So while it's not a remake, it may also not be a reboot, but really, it's up in the air. Being an adventure game, Black Mirror's main focus is on story and narrative over everything else, for better or worse. Players find themselves in the shoes of David Gordon, the 20-something heir to the Gordon legacy. David spent his whole life away from the family estate, having grown up in India with his mother and spent many years traveling all over the place. He only ever makes the trip to Scotland to see the family home after receiving a letter from his absent father, who has left David to inherit everything after he burned himself to death. Ugh. The game's dark, not only in story, but in environments as well, so I'd suggest raising that contrast up just a little bit to see what's actually going on. Topics within Black Mirror's story include, but are not limited to, family secrets, ancient curses, ghosts, attempted murder, committed murder, as well as the possibility of incest at some point. And you thought your family had it bad. It seems David's ancestors decided to build their mansion on land that once belonged to the Picts, who were tribal groups in Scotland from around the medieval time period. They were also, according to the game, pagans and into all kinds of weird black magic stuff. Not what I would say would be an ideal location to put down roots, but I gotta admit, it's got quite a view. The Gordons named their new property Black Mirror and proceeded to have a lineage of madness and horrible people doing horrible things to each other, a lineage David finds himself trapped in the middle of. Due to his family line, David has some form of supernatural abilities. Nothing cool like reading minds or pyrokinesis, but instead the ability to see visions of events that took place in the long past. It's through these visions, as well as the puzzle box that is the Black Mirror Mansion, that David attempts to figure out just what the crap is going on in this place and why is everyone so weird. One thing the game does really well, in my opinion, is its character development. Each character has a clear role to play, as well as interesting backstories that twist and turn throughout the game's plot. Everything is connected to everything else, leading to one heck of a mystery, and I can easily define who each character is. There's David himself, who is an adventurous young man way in over his head. Angus, the butler, who served the Gordons for many years, used to be in the military, and has complete contempt for David. Lady Margaret, who's the head of the house until David fully inherits it, and a mysterious old goat set in her ways, regardless of how horrible those ways may be. And then there's my favorite character, Rory the gardener. Being set in Scotland, pretty much everyone has Scottish accents, and the voice cast King Art put together is spot on for each character.
An impressive building. Scar-Han-Du, though. Unusual. What is its meaning?
Unusual only if you have not bothered to study Gaelic. It means Black Mirror House. Many generations of the Gordon family have been master of this house. It is a great responsibility, perhaps the greatest a man could bear.
Rory is the most Scottish of them all with how he talks, and is also that creepy old weird guy no one really speaks about but is always skulking around in the background. He shows up in odd places, but isn't that bad once you get to know him.
Being a Gordon can be a curse, laddie. Your father kenned the hard way. Mind you dinna follow in his footsteps.
While the characters and cast may be great, unfortunately, the lip sync for when they are talking to each other is not. I don't know if the lines were originally synced to a different language, with only the audio changing to English, but it's rather distracting and just really unpolished. That goes for a majority of the rest of the game as well. It really feels like Black Mirror should have been delayed a month or two so the devs had more time to get everything done. There's plenty of visual issues throughout the game, from random black walls sticking out in strange places to whatever is going on here. Cutscenes also have very jarring transitions between each other and gameplay sections, and the overall graphics, while not awful, is a mixed bag. Something the game does well is how it creates atmosphere. Its lighting really helps make the mansion and the grounds look fantastic, it's just the human characters themselves that feel a bit out of place. The textures on character models tend to be a bit of a lower quality than I would have really expected, and the physics for clothing like coats and jackets moves around in a really odd way. I've also come across a few glitches here and there where I tried to talk to a character only to get stuck inside them and unable to move or do anything at all but reload a checkpoint and hope that would fix the problem. It also feels as if movement was specifically designed with a controller in mind, opposed to using WASD on a keyboard. David doesn't move around with tank controls, which in this case is actually kind of a bad thing. Tank controls were specifically designed for games like this that have constantly changing screens instead of a camera players can freely move. It meant that pressing up would always move the character forward, regardless of the angle of the camera, so players didn't get turned around while they explored. Without it, trying to get David to navigate the world correctly by moving forward as the camera changes all over the place is really obnoxious, since he always moves towards the top of the screen instead of forward in the direction that he's facing. With a joystick, this may not have been a problem due to its multitude of angles, but with controls like a keyboard, David tends to stick to things and can't really move all that well in diagonals. While I'm not saying they should have used tank control since that control method hasn't aged well over the years, King Art should have either gone for full 3D movement where players have control of both David and the camera, or use a point-and-click style of movement instead of what they did. They could have even gone the route of Frogware's Sherlock Holmes games that uses a combination of both. This isn't the first adventure game these guys have made, but it feels rather amateurish. All of these little things add up to souring the overall experience, which is a real shame. Throughout my playthrough of Black Mirror, I found myself both invested and hooked on the story as things developed. I constantly wanted to keep exploring and uncovering clues to discover what the next piece of the puzzle was or what sort of crazy event the game had in store for me, even through the more annoying bits. David's ability to see past memories does add some interest to how the game develops its narration, but they also add the most frustration in my opinion. Black Mirror is an adventure game where the player can die, and I was rather surprised to find this out since it happened rather far into the game. During memory sections, David has to find specific clues while avoiding ghosts that haunt the mansion and its grounds. Coming into contact with one of these ghosts will lead to David's early demise, somehow. I'm not entirely sure how the logic of being strangled by a memory ghost thing works, but it can happen, and it will happen if you aren't careful. The clues you need to find in these sections are usually held by the ghosts themselves, so getting close enough to collect them without being murdered is a lot more difficult than it should be, and it's kinda stupid. Then again, these sections are the only parts of the game I found difficult at all. For being an adventure game, Black Mirror is a bit light on puzzles, and I can only think of 3 or 4 major ones throughout the whole thing. Of course, there's the usual inventory puzzles of looking in every room and opening every drawer while taking anything not nailed down, as well as reading every document you come across as to not miss anything important, but the few specific puzzles that there were surprisingly easy to solve. Many of them remind me of how Fireproof Games did their puzzle design in their The Room series, in which I covered the second one a while back. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved the devs went with this style of puzzle over more obtuse or complex puzzle design of older adventure titles, since it meant I never had to look up a walkthrough for any of them, and that is how I like my puzzle design. Games should equip players with all the information they need to solve their puzzles, with the challenge being using that information correctly, in my opinion, and this game does just that. There was only one puzzle I really had any problems with, even though I found the clue to solve it. There's this one part where David is trying to find a combination to a lock and open a safe, but it seems the clue to this combination is only helpful in the puzzle's default state. There's no way to set it back to how it originally was if you happen to try to crack the safe before finding the clue, like I did, so I had to do things the old-fashioned way. By that, I mean trying every combination until eventually finding the correct one. It's a long and tedious process, but it does work and seems to work on pretty much all the major puzzles in the game. I even managed to solve one of the final puzzles by accident just by messing around with it before solving previous puzzles that would have given me the clue to its answer. Overall, I really liked Black Mirror despite its unpolished nature. I'm not usually one for stories in video games, and even though I enjoy adventure titles, there's few of them that I could say have a great story that could hold out on its own. Black Mirror is a different kettle of fish. I feel like the same story in this game could work as either a book, TV show, or film, and the fact that it's a game where players can figure things out for themselves at their own pace only really helps it. I can't reiterate enough how much I wish this game had been given more time to develop, since while it's completable in its current state, the little issues with it really take away from the experience. What also doesn't help are the rather lengthy loading times in between areas. It's just black screens that last way longer than they need to and happen in between every room. It makes exploring a bit more annoying than it really should be. Outside of the main game, there's a few extras that can be unlocked, but there aren't anything special. Finding photo pieces hidden throughout the mansion and its grounds let players play a short jigsaw minigame of putting them together, but I'm unsure of the purpose of this. Other than that, players can unlock character artwork, but that's it when it comes to extras. I don't really expect anything like this from an adventure game, so while they are kind of lame, it is nice to at least have something, I guess. Black Mirror is available on GOG and Steam for $29.99 with some digital extras like a soundtrack and making-of video for an additional $6.99. Despite its flaws, I feel like Black Mirror is a great adventure game, but I wouldn't blame anyone from staying away from it due to its unpolished nature. Hopefully this is something King Arts Games can fix with patches and updates in the future, but it doesn't really help first impressions. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think of the game or this video in the comment section. I'm MegapieMan, and I'll talk to you guys later. Want to see more quick peeks? Click on the video on the left for Midnight Ultra, a stylized and surreal first-person shooter. Or click on the video on the right for Hand of Fate 2, a card game deck builder brawler thing by Defiant Development.